As soon as the first Resident Evil game completed development, Capcom knew that they had a revolutionary, genre-defining hit on their hands. So work on the sequel began almost immediately. And it seemed like things were coming along quickly, with footage of the game being shown off mere months after the first game came out. But as the game came closer to completion, development was marred by internal conflicts, and ultimately, producer Shinji Mikami decided that it just didn't live up to the standards of the first game. So the game was thrown out in February of 1997, and the entire thing was rebuilt from the ground up into the game we know today. And although the Resident Evil 2 that we did get is widely regarded to be the best game in the series, hardcore Resident Evil fans have been left wondering what could have been. And many of these fans became obsessed with finding the original game. This was a search cursed by a surprising amount of misdirection and treachery. A search with a cast of characters almost as fascinating as the game itself. This is the story of Resident Evil 1.5. This episode is brought to you by Dashlane. If you've spent a lot of time on gaming forums over the years, chances are you've forgotten a lot of passwords and spent tons of time trying to recover them. But you can save that time by using Dashlane, which remembers your passwords and generates extremely secure new passwords. Dashlane also autofills your passwords and login information so you don't even have to type them. This is not only safer, it's also a much faster way to use the internet. Sign up at dashlane.com/Whang for a 30-day free trial of Dashlane Premium and use code Whang for 10% off if you want to upgrade for an easier, safer way to use the internet.
Ada. No.
With the remake of Resident Evil 2 here, I think this is a good time to talk about one of my favorite mysteries of one of my favorite game series of all time. I'm talking about the lost original version of Resident Evil 2, commonly known as Resident Evil 1.5. Ironically, this is my second attempt at making this video because I threw out the first one. I'll never forget my excitement when I first saw the game in motion in the CD-ROM that came with Ultra Game Players magazine. And then for the months following, every single video game magazine would tease us with more and more screenshots and descriptions of what the game was like. But as you certainly know, the game we wound up getting in January of 1998 was not the same game that they had been showing us for over a year. And people actually did succeed at digging up that prototype eventually, but before I go into that insane, meandering search, I want to talk a little bit about what didn't make it to the final game. The most obvious difference between Resident Evil 1.5 and Resident Evil 2 is the characters. You're probably aware that Claire Redfield was originally going to be a motorcyclist named Elza Walker, but what you might not know is that she was originally supposed to be a relative of Forrest Spire, the sniper from Star's Bravo team. They were going to call her Rachel Spire, and while it might have been a cool way to flesh out a minor character from the first game, I think making her a Redfield was a good idea. There's also the case of Leon, who, even before the development of Resident Evil 1.5, was going to have a different name. Grant Bittman. I'm kind of glad they changed that one because, I don't know, to me Grant Bittman sounds like a wienery name.
Oh, hi, I'm Grant Bittman. Oh my god, I'm nauseous.
Watch there be someone Grant Bittman watching this who gets pissed off. Leon, who was originally going to be an experienced cop and not a rookie, would never cross paths with Elza. Rather, they would meet up with a different set of characters. Leon would meet the cop Marvin, who would live much longer, and Ada, who was originally going to be called Linda. Elza would meet a character named John, who used Robert Kendo's character model, and his story arc would resemble Ben's in the final game. Elza would also meet a cop named Roy, and she would also have Sherry in her story arc like Claire, but in the earliest prototypes, Sherry had a yellow outfit. As in the finished game, both characters would meet William and Annette Birkin, and they would also meet Chief Irons, who was an ally and not a villain. There was also the case of the locations. Both versions focused heavily on the police station, but in the original 1.5 version, the police station was more of a modern US police station. They thought the modern police station was a little too boring though, so we wound up getting something that more closely resembles an art museum. Very, very early on in the game's development, they were playing around with the idea of returning to the mansion from the first game, but now obviously it would be destroyed. It was rumored that this concept was actually intended for a game called Resident Evil Dash, but there's no evidence that that game has ever existed. And the gameplay itself was a lot more ambitious too. You could have more zombies on the screen, they were infinitely spawning in some places, and it was a lot more gory. You can get blood on yourself, you would have wear and tear on your clothes, zombies could be blown in half and still crawl at you. Perhaps all that was just a bit too ambitious for the PlayStation hardware at the time. But this is all just descriptions based on screenshots and video clips and interviews and articles. The actual game, the thing that we saw in motion, had to be out there somewhere. But where was it, and who had it? Around the time that Resident Evil 2 was officially released, a sizable community was growing online asking this very question. And obviously, a thing like this is going to attract a ton of liars and scammers. People are trying to get your money, or just trying to get some attention. And that did happen, but it actually wasn't terribly long until the first legitimate contact was made with someone who had access to the game. It was in 1999 that a friend of a Japanese Capcom employee contacted Kim Larson, the owner of Bioflames.com. Bioflames.com was one of the leading websites about Resident Evil 1.5, and if you ever looked the game up back in the day, you definitely came across this website. So this Japanese contact provided Kim with over 100 cell phone photos of Resident Evil 1.5 in motion. These pictures did not match up with any other content that was known to the community at the time, meaning they were almost certainly authentic. But maybe they got spooked or something, maybe they got in trouble because that Japanese contact disappeared almost immediately and has never been heard from again. And after that contact was made throughout the years, all kinds of rumors would spread about private collectors and Capcom employees who had access to the game and were keeping it to themselves. It was on November 29th of 2006 that a forum user named RandomWav spelled out exactly what was verified to exist of the game. The 1.5 community know of only a few betas, all of which are not for sale under any circumstance. If those betas were to find themselves to the public, the original beta testers could find themselves in a lot of trouble with Capcom. Each beta Capcom issued has, to my knowledge, a small file which contains certain code that Capcom can use to see who was the beta tester. Capcom used this with the beta tester who leaked the early build of the final Resident Evil 2, and that guy almost got put behind bars due to the agreement he signed with Capcom. Until those agreements run out, we will not see a rip of the betas. Now, the betas exist. However, the people who own them either won't risk releasing them, or they're within private collectors' hands. This is true of the 3 known copies of 1.5. 2 are in private collector circles, and 1 is still with the ex-Capcom employee. With Capcom taking these leaks so seriously, there's absolutely no way any of these copies would get out to the public, except in the unlikely scenario that someone either betrayed a source or got out of a contract. What's the easiest way to get out of a contract? Die, of course. And legend has it that that's exactly what happened. And I say legend has it because this is more of a hearsay thing than anything with concrete proof, but it's said that in 2007 there was an estate sale belonging to a deceased Capcom employee. Among the assets that were for sale were Resident Evil 2 prototypes. And the timing of this estate sale makes sense because it was shortly after it that a prominent member of the Resident Evil 1.5 community, a guy named .50cal, was approached with the opportunity to purchase this prototype. I was contacted by a friend in the assembler community around late September who started asking me if I would be interested in Biohazard 1.5. Naturally, I was curious, so I asked for more details. He said that an old contact who has it was recently making suggestions that he may be interested in selling it. Not wanting to lose it, but unable to afford the asking price myself, I enlisted the help of a few figureheads of the RE communities. We all pooled our money together and waited for word from my friend. All was going as planned, and we were waiting on video proof from the seller. This dragged on for a while until October 10th. I was told that the disc was already sold for a measly $300. We had been offering a bit over $4,000 for it. Once I informed the group, we were pretty disheartened, but held out hope that whoever bought it would hopefully release more information on it, or even release it since it was such a low amount that was paid. Over the next few weeks, my friend informed me that it was sold because it was offered to this person first. Apparently, the buyer hadn't contacted the seller until he had already moved on to us as the possible buyers. And shortly after receiving the bad news, a brand new entry appeared on the official PlayStation Museum website, a website dedicated to cataloging PlayStation rarities. Resident Evil 1.5, featuring never-before-seen photos and video clips. Obviously, the purchaser of the prototype was the owner of the PlayStation Museum website, a person who came to be known as the Curator. And the Curator very quickly became one of the most hated personalities among the Resident Evil 1.5 community. At first, prominent users of the community such as .50cal tried to befriend the Curator. And at first the Curator would ask them for help with things like translations and debugging and item lists. And they would gladly help, thinking that they were getting on this guy's good side and he might help them out with the game. But whenever they would ask about buying the game or potentially getting a copy, he would just ignore them. Eventually, he would claim to be receiving death threats and go on a bizarre trolling campaign that included things like faking videos pretending to be a Japanese owner of the game, demanding free PSPs and pictures of women who look like Elsa Walker, and eventually he put the prototype on eBay for $125,000. After months of back and forth, .50cal had finally had enough, and he just closed a statement on December 30th with this. So where are we now? Curator scoops the disc from under the community for $300 and states his intentions soon after. I believe I have said this already, and I don't mean to throw fuel on the fire, but I personally have never had the urge to play RE 1.5, and I never understood why everyone was so interested in the game. I volunteered to test the game based on the fact that it's an important piece of PlayStation history. And in his review, he states he's played 1.5 more than Biohazard 2 itself, which couldn't have been very long considering he only had the disc for a few days when it went up. Then he tries to get as much information from the community as possible about the game, translations, item locations, etc., before giving them a big shuck you and cutting off all contact. He then registers YouTube and forum accounts attempting to conceal his identity, goading people into paying exorbitant amounts of money for the disc while simultaneously ignoring real offers from the community to purchase it for a healthy sum. Finally, in late December, he puts it on eBay for $125,000 with an eBay name, BioFlames, an obvious insult thrown at the community. He's shown that he is nothing but a child throughout all this, trying to get people's hopes up that a real sale will come, while saying he's interested in selling it and then ignoring real offers from the community. And from that point on, there would be a lead here, a lead there, a few more verified copies of the game floating around, but none of them could be sold or released. It wasn't until 2011 that another potential seller appeared. A user named Darkmoon reflected on this experience a few years later. About a year and a half ago, a longtime friend of mine and a well-respected member of the Resident Evil community approached me. "John, you got any cash?" I said no because it was after New Year. I was pretty broke. I asked why and got told, "I've finally found 1.5. I should explain this a little. 1.5 was actually found a long time ago, but the individual with the disc was unwilling to sell. After years of communicating with the guy who owned the disc, my friend was the one he went to with an offer. We are talking years of dedication here. And this description makes it sound like the seller might have actually been the Curator after all these years, but when asked, Darkmoon declined to identify the seller. But the price was high. I've seen a few numbers thrown around, so here's the one you want. $8,000. Yes, those 3 zeros are not a typo. $8,000 in US currency. I said I could throw in a few hundred once everything was confirmed. A very nice video was promptly sent to me, but between the two of us, we weren't coming close. I roped in a friend, he got a couple of, yeah, we might be able to help, but there was one person I knew had the cash to get this done. My friend was a little nervous and unwilling, but we didn't have much choice, so he went. And suddenly the deed was done. It's amazing how a huge wad of cash does a thing. A PayPal account was set up and the people who could pay did. I wasn't one of them. I regret that a bit now, not, enough to actually give anyone money, but a bit. Why? Because there are a couple of people who threw in a couple $100 that weren't entirely trustworthy. So we, this secret cabal, played the game. And there just wasn't much to it. The script, what there is, gave some hints, but the game was pretty low on actual content. So one person, the person who put up the money, started assembling a team to fix it. IGAS. Rather than release this very disappointing prototype that people had been searching for at this point over a decade, they decided that they were going to fix it. Team IGAS, aka Team I've Got a Shotgun, would quietly begin searching for programmers and artists to rebuild the game. And honestly, that sounds like kind of a weird decision to me, but at the same time, I'm not the one who put down thousands of dollars, so I don't really have a say in the matter. And Team IGAS would get to work pretty quickly and be able to make a lot of progress uninterrupted for about a year. It was in the summer of 2012 that some of their content started to leak out onto Facebook. The community started to stir a little bit as they are aware that someone had the game and someone was tinkering with it. But they had no idea just how close to home these people were. And as long as the game itself didn't leak, they could continue uninterrupted. And then in February of 2013, the game itself leaked. In fact, not only did it leak, but someone was selling their work. The team deliberated for a while over what to do about this, and then on February 17th, they released this statement. As stated in our open letter on the 17th of February 2013, posted on the fan site The Horror Is Alive via our only true public spokesperson, we regretfully learned that Joel Welsh, aka Colvin, tried to profit from his acquisition of this very build by shopping it around to several members of the Resident Evil community. We learned from several alarming chat logs and sales offers forwarded to us by worried and concerned parties and friends of the team who'd either been directly contacted by Colvin or knew people who had been. As with the situation where leaked media from our project appeared online in the summer of 2012, followed by a small wave of people attempting to scam people into giving them money in exchange for what they believed was 1.5 or more information on the project, we quickly investigated the situation and found our signature watermarks all over both the media Colvin had presented in public, the media he was shopping around to people, and the terminology he used to describe certain things pertaining to the build he'd obtained. People attempting to profit on our non-profit efforts and both our personal and monetary investments is something we cannot stand for and is something we feel greatly taints the Resident Evil community, the prototype community, the archival and preservation of video game history, the integrity and face value of people, and our goal and intentions for this here restoration project. While we cannot speak on behalf of Capcom, we do believe that charging money for illegal and unsanctioned duplication of their data is something that should be frowned upon and avoided at all costs. So our plea to you is, if you paid for this here build of Resident Evil 1.5, you've been cheated and should demand your money back and or file a fraud report via the service you used to complete your monetary transaction. And there was also a file attached to the statement. And that file was an ISO, a playable download of Team IGAS's Resident Evil 1.5 restoration project. An unfinished and incomplete version of the project, but the very first time that Resident Evil 1.5 had been publicly available on the internet. And despite this hiccup, Team IGAS would continue to work on their restoration project known as the MZD build or Magic Zombie Door build, with a number of patches being released over the subsequent years. Additionally, the unedited version of the prototype known as the 40% build is also out there. Some people think the MZD build is the best way to experience the game, others are purists who prefer the 40% build, but ultimately, I think at that point, 15 years later, most had given up hope of ever being able to play this game. And that's not where the story ends necessarily. You see, even though the 40% build is out there and Team IGAS was able to restore a great deal of it, there's still another, more complete prototype in existence. This is commonly referred to as the 80% build, and it's believed to be the one that was shown to Bioflames all those years back in 1999. The 80% build would be the one that they had when the game was cancelled, meaning that is the most complete version of the game. I think it's a safe bet that that thing might still be floating around in Japan somewhere, and I wouldn't be too surprised if one day it got out there and we could finally experience the game that Shinji Mikami felt was so boring that it merited throwing away an entire year's work. But hey, if we don't, at least we're getting an Elza Walker skin. Anyway, if you like this video, you'll probably also like my video about Barry Burton's voice actor. I'm out of here.